Welcome to Uplift 66, our weekly video podcast that airs on this channel at 8 a.m. every Saturday. Our program is focused on those who are grieving and who have suffered loss, like myself. It's intended to help you to get resources that you can move forward after what could be a most devastating experience. This is for persons who have been suffering continuously or have just faced that kind of scenario of personal tragedy. What is the anchor for this program? The anchor for this program is the book of the Bible, John 10, verse 10. I have come that you can have life and have it more abundantly, says the Lord. And we feel people should continue to aspire to having an abundant life. Spiritual upliftment is our primary goal. We also have a focus on social upliftment, economic upliftment, and in some instances, cultural upliftment, because people would be spread across many different competencies in the time when they are stricken with grief. So we are looking to rise up out of the valley and climb up the hilltop. This is our focus, and I'll be back to share a biblical nugget with you right after this. Okay, we are back, and like I said before, every week we try to give some kind of scriptural guidance. And today our focus is in the book of Proverbs. Very well known book, and Proverbs really treats with grief. There are passages that help to give you strength in vulnerability and believing that sorrow is temporary. Right? Key messages include that the brokenhearted are not alone. Mourning is a season that leads to healing, and memories turn love into an enduring treasure. That is the overall focus of this book of Proverbs. But there are about 4 themes I would like to emphasize. Trusting beyond understanding. Here it is taken from Proverbs 3, verse 5 to 6. And it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. This is a very popular scripture verse, but it also addresses the issue of grief, bereavement, loss. Now, what it means is that physical and spiritual toll of a crushed spirit, while highlighting that over small moments of joy can act as a restorative medicine during the healing process. We do have to look to this kind of context for recuperation from what is a bad case of grief, suffering, and sorrow. Another aspect that we would have to treat with is a legacy of blessing. Coming out of Proverbs, it says in Proverbs 10:7 that the memory of the righteous is a blessing. The memory of the righteous is a blessing. This provides comfort that a loved one is in a place of safety and peace. That's why we also always say, rest in peace and sleep in peace. It has a relevance to this book of Proverbs, chapter 10, verse 7. And now, of course, there is another one, safety in the storm, Proverbs 14, verse 32. Even in death, the righteous have a refuge. Even in death, the righteous have a refuge, which emphasizes the whole question of safety and peace. Of course, there is hope for restoration after sorrow. Proverbs 24:16. It says that though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. This provides comfort that a period of grief, however overwhelming, is not a final chapter, and that resilience is possible. Resilience, the ability to come back, to bounce back and continue to your journey to fulfill your own destiny and purpose. There are resources right here in this chapter to be able to treat with the scenario. The power of joy and healing. The power of joy and healing is another theme, and that is from Proverbs 17:22. A cheerful heart is a good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. This talks about finding moments of joy or gratitude and actively aid in healing from profound sorrow. And finally, I want to talk about the importance of community support. That is addressed in Proverbs 17, verse 17, which notes, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. This validates the need for support systems and community during dark times. We never succeed in grieving and recovering from grief alone. And this is a trend or a statement that has been identified in Numbers, Lamentations, and Ecclesiastes when I had shared on those in prior programs. So I'm leaving it here, and you digest this as we go forward, that we are vulnerable. Accept our vulnerability. We can bounce back from the valley to the hilltop. And as a matter of fact, it is not unusual for us to see a new chapter, a new journey unfold in our lives after having such grief. I am on that path right now. I am sure some of you will be doing so as well. So our final segment, we will have our very special guest, our grief and trauma specialist will join us right after this moment. And so we are back, and this is our final segment of the program, Uplift 66. And our resource person, the expert, Dr. Andy Ansola, is with us at this time. Via Zoom, he's speaking to us from his headquarters in South Florida. And this is the founder and CEO of Hearts Flow Incorporated. Welcome, Dr. Andy Ansola.
Welcome, welcome. It's nice to hear from you.
All right, and at this point in time, we were expressing before that you have been doing a lot of research and you are coming out with your own new material treating with grief and loss. Just give us a little background into what is the motivation for you having introduced this new research. Tell us what is the name and what motivated you to go into that direction.
The name of the therapy is called vowel therapy. Simple name. In basic education, everyone knows, at least if you have limited education, you know the 5 vowels: A, E, I, O, U. But also, when people grieve, like grief, trauma, addiction, emotional pain, so they often struggle to find language for what they feel. Many individuals will say things like, this is one of the reasons I don't know how to explain what's happening inside of me. And I'm sure you could relate to that because you had a recent experience, grief experience. So this is one of the reasons I developed a therapy. What it is, it's simple. It's a heart-centered healing model designated to help people move through grief, emotional pain, trauma, and life disruptions, using something very simple, the 5 vowels of the alphabet, A, E, I, O, U. Very simplistic. Why the vowels? In addition to that, is like basic understanding of what the 5 vowels are, is that every word in the English language needs a vowel in order to exist. Wow. And in the same way, every healing journey requires certain emotional elements in order to move forward. So the vowels become anchors for emotional and spiritual recovery. I'll just give you a snippet of the five vowels, what they are, because I'm not sure how much information you have shared so far. I'm trying to bring this to Tobago, especially with a grief conference within the next 2 months or shorter, to label Tobago as the hub for as an international grief hub, international, especially in the Caribbean, because it is not dealt properly or therapeutically, I would say, as I see it from my experience, even from way back when I was an active police officer into my personal struggle with my mom's death. So I believe that this is a great opportunity for us to be pioneers. I think that's a good word. For Tobago to be pioneers in this field. I've suggested a lot of, since we've been talking, stuff like, spoke about grief groups, and I understand there's none in Trinidad and Tobago. Simple things. So the five vowels basically: A, acknowledge, acceptance. Healing begins when we acknowledge what has happened. Many people try to skip this stage. They minimize pain, suppress emotions, or pretend that they are okay. But healing begins with honesty. So what we acknowledge the loss, we acknowledge the pain, the disappointment, the trauma, or the addiction, which some people would turn to eventually for lack of coping skills. So acceptance does not mean we like what happened. It simply means we stop denying the reality of it. That's A. E, and I think that's enough of a teaser to, I don't want to give away too much
Right.
because I
Well, I
want
want to
people to come to
ask,
the conference.
as you mentioned the five vowels and you started with A, is your work universal or it is more suited to the African-based communities? Because I would say this, there is a view that the African or black people, we holler when we have loss. Well, the other people, they are very mundane and, they don't have very expressive ways. So does that inform any of your work that you can say it's more suited to the African diaspora or the black population?
No, I wouldn't label it like that because it's international. And so I always look at, as I was talking to one of my patients yesterday, what's the culture of the people that I'm presenting this to or treating with? Because I get patients from all over the world, different nationalities, different ethnicities. I have patients from the Philippines. So I wouldn't pigeonhole it into. But I understand what you're saying. I understand the question.
Yes.
But it's a lot of that would limit it, and I want it. It should not be limited. Grief is grief is grief is grief, no
Okay.
matter what culture you come from.
Okay.
But you're correct. The African culture does it differently. So I have to keep adjusting based on my patients who I get in.
Right.
I just had a patient who committed. Now I have to deal with his mom. It's more, some cultural things are in that mix. So I have to be culturally sensitive to that culture to deal with that grieving mom at this point in time. I hope that answers your
Yes.
question.
So you can continue with the E
Okay. E
steps.
is expression / emotion. Once something is acknowledged, it must be expressed. Simple. So we are going along this linear trajectory. So pain that is unexpressed becomes pressure, real pressure. That pressure often shows up as anxiety, anger, depression, addiction, or relational conflicts, especially relational conflicts. Um, Expression can happen through conversations, journaling, prayer, crying, art, therapy, or community support. And that's the part I'm talking about, community support, where I'm talking about establishing grief groups. And let us be the first in the Caribbean or in the world. Well, it already exists in the world, but let us be the forerunners in Tobago with spreading the grief groups around. And that's part of the conference also, to train people on how to do grief groups. You don't have to have a degree. You just have to have the heart, and it's in conjunction with the name of my company, Hearts Flow. Right? When you look at my label, my logo, you see all of this, what I'm talking, flowing all into one river, right? Different streams. So expression allows the heart to release what it has been carrying. Insight. When emotion is expressed, clarity begins to emerge, starts coming out, it starts oozing out. And that is the stage of insight. People begin asking very important questions like, what is this experience teaching me? How did this affect my identity? What happened? What patterns do I see in my life now? What roles may still be influencing my decision? So insight allows individuals to move from reacting to reflecting, from reacting to reflecting. This stage is where wisdom begins to develop. You become your own authority on your grief. So you start to get the wisdom. You start saying, well, so one of the questions I would normally ask in one of my patients in some of the initial sessions is, have you ever lost someone before? What did you do? And then it brings them back to, I did this, but this one is different. Well, as you keep asking yourself these questions, patterns start emerging, and then you start to see, I need to take, which is leading on to the next one. I need to take ownership. I need to take ownership. So insight alone is not enough. So at some point, we must take ownership on our healing journey. You have to. What does ownership mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is accepting responsibility for the choices we make moving forward. Because we're going to make some choices. We have to make some choices. We cannot stay stagnant. So recognizing that while we cannot control what happened to us, we can influence what happens next. So there's something called an emotional hangover. That is something I'll talk about in the conference. An emotional hangover. And I have an activity that I know is going to blow the participants' mind. Because some people are like, emotional hangover? What is this? And I know your brains, knowing the type of person you are, you're like, okay, what's going on next? So ownership means accepting responsibility for the choices you make moving forward, recognizing that while we cannot control what happened to us, we can influence what happens next. Ownership empowers individuals to say, my past may have shaped me, but it will not define my future. And lastly, unity. The final vowel is unity. Unity, unity. Unity represents integration and reconnection. It is where the person begins to reconnect with themselves, others, purpose, community, and for many people, their relationship with God. So unity is where the broken pieces of life begin to come together again. It does not erase the pain, but it transforms the pain into purpose, compassion, and growth. And lastly, what I want to say is why it matters. It matters is its simplicity and accessible, the vowel therapy. So whether someone is in the therapy, recovery from addiction, grieving the loss of a loved one, struggling with trauma, or searching for emotional clarity, they can remember these 5 vowels. A, E, I, O, U.
Well, I am very, very informed and very, very inspired by what you have shared. So I stuck with the I. Right now, I want to tell you thank you again for bringing your insight to the program today, and let us be in touch as we continue to look at the resources we want the people to benefit from, even while we are on the video podcast. So I want to wish you all the best. Thank you again for tuning in today.
Thank you. Always welcome.
Folks, this is the end of the program. We are very grateful. We had to divide this section with the contribution from Dr. Ansola into two. And in this circumstance, you will see part two on another occasion. This is Uplift 66, and we are closing out. We ask you to stay focused. Remember that grief can be the birthplace of a new chapter, a new journey, and we want you on board with us. All the best. So long.